The scorching twin suns hung low over the rusted rooftops of Tarsus 4's scrap district, painting everything in a fierce orange glare. Heat shimmered above the dirt streets, and the smell of burning metal lingered in the air. Inside a small, cluttered workshop at the edge of town, a man worked alone. Reeves tightened the last bolt on a dented navigation panel. His knuckles were raw, his shirt stained with sweat and grease. A battered ceiling fan turned lazily overhead, pushing warm air around without much effect. He leaned back from the workbench, wiping his brow. "Another masterpiece, Reeves," he muttered under his breath, voice dry with sarcasm. The panel in front of him wasn't pretty, but it worked, and that was the only thing that mattered out here. The locals didn't care much for humans, but they cared for working tech, and had a gift for turning dead machines into breathing ones again. He was about to grab his water flask when the workshop door creaked open. Bright sunlight spilled inside, outlining a small, thin figure in the doorway. She was an alien girl, maybe 13 by human years. Pale blue skin, faint white freckles across her cheeks, and large, silver eyes that seemed too old for her face. Her clothes were worn, a patched tunic hanging loose on her frame. In her hands, she held a half-deflated leather sphere, a practice ball for the most popular sport on Tarsus 4. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. I can't play ball." Frowned, he had seen her before, watching games from the edges of the dusty square, never joining in. But up close, he saw why. Her left leg was gone from the knee down. In its place was a crude wooden peg, tied with strips of cloth. The girl shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "They told me you fix things." "I fix machines," said, "not people." "I'm not asking you to fix me," she said quickly, clutching the ball. "I just thought maybe you'd know what to do." Didn't answer at first. This was not his problem, not his business. And yet, there was something in her voice, something like quiet defiance. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she replied. "All right, Lyra," said, leaning against the workbench. "Why come to me? You've got medics in town." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Medics don't help people like me." Understood, the locals had their own ways. If you were born weak or got broken, you were left behind. That was their tradition. Harsh, but that was Tarsus 4. He took a long drink from his flask. "So you can't play, what's the real problem?" Lyra hesitated, then glanced over her shoulder as if making sure no one had followed her. "They're holding trials tomorrow. For the Youth League. The scouts will be there. It's the only way to get off-world without joining the militia. If I make the team, I can leave Tarsus 4. Raised an eyebrow. "And you think I can make you run again in 24 hours? "I think," she swallowed hard, "I think you're the only one who might try." The fan hummed above them. Outside, the wind rattled the sheet metal roof. Sighed, "You know what they'll say if they see me helping you, that I'm meddling, and they don't like humans meddling." "I know," she said, her silver eyes didn't waver, "but I don't care." For a moment, he just stared at her. She was too young to have that kind of stubbornness, or maybe too desperate to let go of it. The next hour passed in silence, except for the sound of tools clinking and the faint hiss of a welding torch. Rummaged through piles of scrap, pulling out old servos, alloy plates, and a damaged knee joint from a broken cargo droid. "This isn't going to be pretty," he said, "and it won't last forever, but if you can balance, you might just move fast enough to impress those scouts." Lyra's eyes lit up for the first time. "You're really going to do it?" Grunted, "Don't thank me yet." As he worked, she watched every move. Her hands twitched like she wanted to help but didn't know how. Finally, she asked, "Were you always a mechanic?" "No," he said, voice low. "I used to be a soldier." She tilted her head. "What happened?" "I got tired of following orders that didn't make sense." She didn't ask more, and he didn't offer. By nightfall, the new leg was ready. It was rough, metal rods, mismatched bolts, and a jury-rigged shock absorber, but it was strong. "All right," said, holding it up. "Let's see if you're as tough as you look." It took nearly an hour to strap the prosthetic in place and adjust it so it didn't pinch. Lyra gritted her teeth through the discomfort. When she finally stood, she wobbled, arms flailing for balance. "Easy," said, steadying her. "You're walking on a machine now. It's going to feel wrong at first." She took a tentative step. The metal joint clicked softly, then another step, smoother this time. By the 10th step, she was moving with a limp but without falling. A small smile broke across her face. It works. Don't get ahead of yourself, warned. Running, a whole different beast. She practiced late into the night, sweat dripping down her forehead. By the time she left, she could jog a short distance without tripping. At the door, she paused. "Why are you helping me?" Didn't answer right away. He could have said it was because he was bored or because he liked a challenge, but the truth was simpler. "Because no one helped me when I needed it," he said finally. She nodded once, then disappeared into the shadows of the street. Closed the workshop and leaned against the wall, staring at the sky. The twin moons were out, casting silver light over the rooftops. He should have felt good, but instead a knot twisted in his gut. Helping her was going to draw attention, and attention on Tarsus 4 was dangerous. The next morning, he was proven right. The knock came early before the suns had risen. 3 sharp raps on the metal door. Opened it to find 2 tall figures in dark red armor, the city enforcers. Their insect-like helmets hid their faces, but the glowing yellow visors were enough to send a chill down his spine. "Human," the taller one said in a deep, metallic voice. "We have questions." Kept his tone casual. "What kind of questions?" "About the crippled girl," the other said. "You were seen with her last night." His jaw tightened. "She came by asking for help, that's all." "Help," the first enforcer tilted his head. "You know the law. Interference in the trials is forbidden, especially by an outsider." "I didn't interfere," lied. The second enforcer stepped closer. "If she shows up tomorrow with an advantage, we will know who to blame." They left without another word, but stood in the doorway long after they were gone. His hands were clenched into fists. He knew then that the game had changed. Tomorrow wasn't just about helping Lyra play ball. Tomorrow might get them both killed. The day of the youth trials dawned hot and restless. Even before the suns cleared the jagged horizon, the square at the center of Tarsus 4's settlement was alive with noise. Vendors shouting, banners snapping in the wind, and the deep hum of the crowd gathering to watch. Kept to the shadows on the edge of the square, the brim of his cap pulled low. He didn't want to draw the enforcers' attention again, not today. His eyes scanned the crowd until he found Lyra. She stood apart from the other hopefuls, a thin figure in a loose brown tunic. The new metal leg glinted faintly beneath the cloth. She was holding the ball in both hands, staring at the ground as the others stretched and joked. She didn't look like she belonged there. And that's exactly what worried. The trials were brutal, designed to weed out the weak. Wasn't just a game, it was part sport, part combat, and part endurance test. On Tarsus 4, it doubled as militia training for the young. The field was an oval of hard-packed dirt with scattered stone pillars jutting out of the ground. At each end stood a heavy, circular goal ring suspended 3 meters above the ground. To score, you had to leap, spin, and slam the ball through the ring while dodging blows from the other team. Had played something similar back in his military days, except the ball hadn't been leather, it had been a live stun grenade. The head referee, a broad-shouldered alien with mottled red skin, barked the rules in the guttural local tongue. Lyra understood, had heard her speak the language fluently, but she still glanced toward him once, just long enough to catch his eye. "You can do this," he mouthed. The whistle blew. The first round was chaos. Lyra's team scrambled for the ball, dust flying around their feet. She moved cautiously at first, testing the leg, finding her rhythm. Every step was a gamble, too much weight on the wrong side and the joint would lock, too little and she'd trip. A taller boy on the opposing team spotted her and smirked. He went for her, shoving her hard. She stumbled but didn't fall. That small victory lit something in her eyes. Within minutes, she was darting between the pillars, using her smaller size to slip past defenders. She didn't go for the ball, she focused on blocking opponents, setting up her teammates. Smart. She wasn't ready for high jumps yet, but she could make herself useful. From the sidelines, felt a flicker of pride. She was holding her own. Then he saw them, 2 enforcers at the far end of the field, helmets gleaming under the suns. Watching her, watching him. He shifted position, pretending to watch from another angle. He needed to keep his head down, but the knot in his stomach tightened. Midway through the second round, the ball came to Lyra. It wasn't supposed to. Her teammate had fumbled under pressure, and the leather sphere bounced right to her feet. The crowd roared. The opposing team closed in. His mind raced. Don't push it. Pass the ball, but Lyra didn't pass. She tucked it under one arm and ran. The new leg clicked and hissed with every stride, dust kicking up behind her. She swerved around one defender, ducked under another's arm, and headed for the goal ring. A jump was impossible. She couldn't match the other's height, but she didn't try to match them. She used the pillar near the goal as a ramp, running 3 steps up its side before launching herself sideways. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her throw was clean, powerful. The ball sailed through the ring. The horn blared. She landed hard, stumbled, but stayed upright. The crowd erupted. Even the scouts leaning on the rail looked impressed. But didn't cheer, because he saw the enforcers lean toward each other, their helmets almost touching as they spoke in low voices. Something told him they weren't impressed, they were angry. When the match ended, Lyra's team had won. She was sweaty, dusty, but grinning. She spotted and ran toward him through the crowd. "I did it, did you see?" she said, breathless. "I saw," he said, forcing a smile. "You were reckless, but you made it work." Before she could answer, a shadow fell over them, the 2 enforcers. Lyra, the taller one, said. His tone was almost polite, which made it worse. "A word." She froze, stepped between them. "She's just a kid, trial over." The shorter enforcer tilted his head. And yet, she played with an advantage, a device not sanctioned by the council. His jaw tightened. "You calling a crude prosthetic an advantage?" "Rules are rules," the tall one said. "Come with us, girl." Lyra's smile had vanished. Her hands clenched at her sides. She looked at panic flickering in her silver eyes. "Wait," said. "If the council has an issue, they can speak to me." "They will," the enforcer said, "after we question her." The crowd had started to watch, sensing trouble. That was dangerous. Crowds could turn ugly here, especially when it involved a human stepping out of line. Knew he had 2 choices. Let them take her or do something stupid. He chose stupid. He stepped closer to the enforcers. "She's not going anywhere with you without an official summons." The tall enforcer's hand drifted to the shock baton on his belt. "You forget your place, human." "And you forget I know the trade laws," said evenly. "The League is under off-world commerce regulations. That means your local laws don't apply until the scouts file their report." It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. The shorter enforcer's visor turned toward his partner. A silent exchange passed between them. Then, without a word, they stepped back. "Enjoy your victory, girl," the tall one said at last. "It will not last." They walked away. Let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Come on," he said to Lyra. "We're leaving." They slipped out of the square before the crowd lost interest. Back in the narrow alleys, kept his voice low. "You have to lay low now. Those 2 aren't done with us." Lyra's grin returned, faint but stubborn. "Then we just have to stay ahead of them." He stopped walking. "You don't get it. They'll dig into your past, your family, anyone who's helped you." Her eyes darkened. "I don't have family." That hit harder than expected. He didn't push for details. They reached the workshop just as the suns dipped low, locked the door and dropped his toolkit on the bench. "We've got 1 day before the scouts make their picks," he said. "Tomorrow you'll either be off-world or you'll be a target." "I can handle myself," she said. He shook his head. "Not against them, so tonight we prepare." The next hours were a blur of work. Adjusted the prosthetic, reinforcing the knee joint. He added a lightweight brace along her thigh to improve stability. Then he dug into an old crate and pulled out something he hadn't touched in years, a combat visor. He stripped out the targeting software but kept the motion sensor display. "Wear this tomorrow," he told her. "It'll help you track opponents." She put it on, smiling faintly. "Looks like I'm in the militia." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." By midnight, she was asleep in the corner on a rolled-up blanket. Sat at the bench, staring at the half-empty bottle of synth whiskey in his hand. He knew helping her wasn't just risky, it was suicidal. The enforcers weren't just local bullies. They answered to the Council of Tarsus, and the Council didn't forgive humans who broke their rules. But he also knew one thing. Walking away wasn't an option anymore. Just before dawn was jolted awake by a noise outside, a soft metallic scrape. He grabbed his wrench and moved to the window, peering through the narrow gap in the shutters. 2 figures in red armor stood at his door. One of them was holding a cutting torch. The first spark flared in the darkness, lighting the edge of the frame. They weren't going to wait for the scouts. They were coming for her now. The hiss of the cutting torch grew louder, the metal door glowing faint orange where the heat bit through. His heart was already pounding. He glanced at Lyra, still curled under the blanket in the corner. "Up," he whispered sharply. Her eyes flickered open. "What?" "No time." He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her up. "They're here." She froze for half a second, then heard the muffled hum of the torch. Her face drained of color. Grabbed his tool belt, buckled it around his waist, and yanked open a metal hatch in the floor. The air that came up was cold and stale. "In," he ordered. She peered into the darkness. "What is?" "Maintenance leads under the street. Go." The torch outside sputtered, then roared again. The cut was halfway around the lock. Lyra climbed into the hatch, followed, pulling the panel shut over their heads. The space was narrow, smelling of rust and dust. Pipes ran along the low ceiling, dripping condensation. He had to crawl on his elbows. Above them, the door gave a metallic groan. Then a crash. Heavy boots stomped inside. "They're in the workshop," Lyra whispered. "Keep moving," said. They crept along the tunnel, the sound of their breathing loud in the silence. Through the thin metal above, muffled voices echoed, sharp, mechanical tones of the enforcers. "Scan for life signs," one said. Clenched his teeth. The walls were lined with shielding scraps, one of his own paranoid modifications. It might block their scanners if they weren't thorough. The tunnel split ahead, pointed left. "That leads to the back alley, quieter." They had just started down it when a deep clang sounded behind them. A hatch had been opened. "They found it," muttered. The beam of a helmet torch spilled into the from behind. "Go, go, go," shoved Lyra forward. The tunnel was barely wide enough for him, and his boots scraped against the floor as he crawled faster. The enforcer's boots rang against the metal as they followed. Ahead, the tunnel sloped upward. A round hatch waited at the top, sealed with an old hand crank. Reached it, spun the crank, and shoved hard. The hatch stuck. "They're getting closer," Lyra gasped. "I noticed," he grunted, throwing his weight against it. With a metallic shriek, it popped open. Fresh air rushed in, tinged with the acrid scent of smoke from the city above. They spilled into a narrow alley behind the workshop row. Trash bins lined the walls, and the sky above was just starting to lighten. Slammed the hatch shut and kicked a crate over it. "Stay close," he said. They moved quickly, weaving through back passages. The main streets were too exposed, but even here the enforcers could track them, knew they had motion sensors in their visors. At the next junction, he grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her into a side door. Inside was a cramped storeroom stacked with crates of dried grain. He crouched low. "We wait here," he said. "Let them pass." Minutes dragged, distant footsteps echoed, then faded. Lyra exhaled slowly. "Do you think they—" The door behind them slammed open. A red-armored enforcer filled the doorway. Reacted without thinking. His hand shot to his belt, pulling the heavy wrench free. The enforcer stepped forward, baton raised. The first swing missed head by inches, cracking a wooden crate. Dropped low, driving the wrench into the back of the enforcer's knee joint. The armor dented with a sharp clang, and the enforcer staggered. "Run!" shouted. Lyra bolted out the side window, landing in the alley beyond. Followed, vaulting through just as the enforcer lunged again. They ran. The alleys twisted like a maze, each turn revealing another row of shuttered shops and sleeping homes. The sun's first light spilled between the buildings, painting everything in long shadows. Risked a glance back, 2 enforcers now gaining ground. "They're faster than us," Lyra panted. Not for long, spotted a narrow gap between 2 crumbling walls. "There." They squeezed through, scraping against the rough stone. The enforcers followed, but their armor slowed them in the tight space. The gap opened into the old market square. Abandoned for years, its stalls collapsed and covered in dust. In the center, a massive crane loomed, its rusted frame stretching high above. Sprinted toward it. "Climb." Lyra hesitated. "They'll see us." "They'll see us anywhere. Move." She grabbed the lowest rung and started climbing, the metal leg clanking against the ladder. Followed, his muscles burning. Below, the enforcers emerged into the square. One raised a wrist device, calling for backup. Halfway up, grabbed Lyra's ankle. "Stop." She froze. What? Jump to the roof, he said, nodding toward the building next to the crane. The gap was wide, but not impossible. You're crazy, she whispered. Yes, now go. She took a deep breath, then leapt. For a terrifying moment, she was suspended in the air, then her hands caught the building's edge. She hauled herself up, jumped after her, landing hard on the cracked roof. Below, the enforcers shouted, scrambling to follow. But by the time they reached the top of the crane, and Lyra were already sprinting across the roof and dropping into another alley. They didn't stop until the buildings thinned and the air smelled faintly of fuel. The spaceport was ahead, low metal hangars, cargo loaders trundling between them, and the distant gleam of ships under maintenance. Pulled Lyra into the shadow of a cargo stack. You're not going home, he said. If they find you again before the trials, you're done. Lyra's breathing was ragged. Then what now? Glance toward the nearest hangar. Now we get you lost. They slipped inside the hangar. Mechanics bustled around a half-disassembled freighter, its hull panels hanging open, nodded toward the rear. In there, stay low. They ducked behind a stack of spare fuel cells. Lyra crouched, clutching her ball. This isn't going to work, she whispered. They're not going to stop. They will, said, though his voice was grim, or they'll have to go through me. From outside came the sharp thump of boots. Voices followed, too close. Peered around the fuel cells. 2 enforcers had entered the hangar, scanning each row. They tracked us here, Lyra breathed. His mind raced. Then he saw it, an open maintenance hatch in the freighter's side leading into the cargo bay. Change of plans, he said. We're boarding. Before Lyra could protest, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the ship. They slipped inside the hatch, closing it quietly behind them. The cargo bay was dark and smelled of coolant. Found a corner behind a crate stamped with off-world EXPORTS. He crouched, motioning for silence. Through the thin hull, the enforcers' voices were muffled but close, too close. Then a hiss, the freighter's engines powering up. Lyra's eyes widened. It's leaving. Realized the truth at the same time. If they stayed hidden, they'd be off-world in minutes, away from the enforcers, away from Tarsus 4. But also away from the trials. She must have been thinking the same thing. If I leave now, I lose my chance, she whispered. His jaw tightened. If you stay, you might lose more than that. A sudden metallic clang echoed from the far side of the bay. A crate shifted. Froze. Then a harsh beam of light cut through the shadows. An enforcer stood in the open hatch. The freighter's cargo bay was dim, lit only by a few thin strips of blue emergency lights along the floor. The enforcer in the hatch stepped inside slowly, the beam from his helmet lamp sweeping across the stacked crates. His pulse thudded in his ears. He could feel Lyra's trembling shoulder pressed against his arm in the shadows. The enforcer's boots clanged against the metal deck, each step deliberate. He was hunting now. His eyes darted around. The cargo bay was a trap, no windows, no second exit except the main hatch behind the enforcer. They couldn't run. Then we fight. He loosened his grip on the heavy wrench still hooked in his belt and whispered, "Stay behind me, no matter what." Lyra swallowed but nodded. The enforcer's lamp beam swept closer, weighted, muscles coiled. When the light slid across their hiding place, exploded into motion. He lunged from behind the crate, swinging the wrench in a brutal arc. The steel connected with the enforcer's wrist, knocking the shock baton from his hand. Sparks snapped across the deck. The enforcer staggered but didn't fall. He was big, too big. His armored fist shot forward, slamming into his ribs. Pain exploded in his side, driving the air from his lungs. "Run," barked. Lyra scrambled around the crates toward the far corner, but the enforcer caught her movement. He turned, reaching for her. Grabbed the fallen baton and jammed it into the joint at the back of the enforcer's knee. The electric crackle filled the bay, and the enforcer dropped to one knee with a grunt. "Go," yelled again. The cargo bay shuddered as the freighter's engines roared louder. Launch sequence. They had seconds before the doors sealed and the ship lifted off. Dragged Lyra toward the inner maintenance hatch on the far wall. He slammed the manual release. It hissed open, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the ship. "Inside," he ordered. They scrambled through and slammed the hatch shut, just as the enforcer rose to his feet on the other side. The passage was tight and dim, the air smelling faintly of coolant and ozone. Pulled Lyra forward, running blind until the corridor split. Left toward engineering, right toward the crew quarters. "Which way?" Lyra gasped. "Left," said. "Engines mean access hatches mean exits." They pounded down the left corridor, the deck vibrating beneath their feet as the freighter lifted from the ground. Gravity shifted, pulling them sideways for a moment before stabilizing. They burst into the engine room, a cathedral of machinery. A massive reactor pulsed in the center, flanked by humming plasma conduits. Crew members in grease-stained uniforms shouted over the noise, barely noticing and Lyra at first. Then one of them, a burly mechanic, spotted the baton still in his hand. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." Raised his free hand. "We're leaving, just need an access hatch." A metallic clang cut him off. The far hatch slid open and the enforcer stepped through, visor glowing. The mechanic backed away fast. "Not my problem." Stomach turned cold. They were boxed in, no way past without going through him. The enforcer advanced slowly this time, baton humming to life. "You should have stayed in your hole, human," he said. Glanced around, his eyes caught on a coolant vent just above Lyra's head. He pointed. "Up." "What?" she hissed. "Climb." She jumped, catching the vent's edge and hauling herself up, grabbed a heavy spanner from the workbench and faced the enforcer head-on. The first swing came fast, ducked, feeling the heat of the baton as it missed his face by inches. He countered with a strike to the enforcer's side, but the armor absorbed most of it. The enforcer shoved him back hard, slammed into the railing, the breath knocked from him. Above, Lyra had pulled herself into the vent and was reaching down. "Come on." The enforcer lunged again, stepped sideways at the last second, hooking the spanner through the enforcer's belt. Using the man's momentum, he heaved him toward the reactor railing. The enforcer caught himself before going over, but it was enough. Jumped, grabbing Lyra's hand. She hauled him into the vent just as the baton's crackle lit the air beneath them. They crawled fast, the metal tunnel vibrating with the freighter's acceleration. After a long, twisting climb, they reached a vertical shaft with a maintenance ladder. Faint daylight filtered from above. "This goes to the dorsal airlock," said. "If we time it right, we can jump before they're clear of the atmosphere." Lyra stared at him. "Jump from a moving ship." "Better than waiting for them to drag us back," he said grimly. They climbed. The higher they went, the louder the wind roared through the thin seams of the hatch above. The ship was still low enough that the air outside wouldn't kill them instantly, but it would hurt. At the top, braced himself against the hatch and looked at her. "When I open this, we go together, no hesitation." She nodded, gripping the ladder tight. He spun the release wheel. The hatch blew upward, wind howling in. Sunlight blinded them for an instant. The freighter's hull stretched out ahead, curving away toward the bow. "Go," shouted. They scrambled out, boots clanging on the metal skin of the ship. The wind whipped at them, tearing at their clothes. In the distance, the surface of Tarsus 4 blurred past, fields, roads, then desert. "There," pointed to a low hangar roof flashing by below. "On my mark, jump." They sprinted along the hull, every step a fight against the wind. The hangar loomed closer, counted in his head. "Now." They leapt. The world spun. They hit the hangar roof hard, the impact jarring through his bones. He rolled, gasping, and heard Lyra's sharp grunt beside him. They were alive, barely. They slid down the sloped roof and dropped into a service alley behind the hangar. His knees ached, and his ribs screamed from the earlier hit, but they had no time to rest. Because down the alley, a shadow moved. It wasn't an enforcer this time. It was a man in a dark coat, his face hidden by the hood, except for the gleam of an old, off-world comm unit in his ear. "You're the mechanic," the man said in a low voice, "and the girl." His hand went to his wrench. "Who's asking?" The man smiled faintly. "Someone who can get you off Tarsus 4 without a trial, but you'll owe me." Lyra glanced at uncertainty in her silver eyes. "We can't trust him." The man's smile didn't fade. "You can't stay here either. The enforcers just put a bounty on you both." Felt the weight of the choice pressing down, stay and fight, or take a stranger's offer into the unknown. Before he could answer, the comm in the man's ear crackled with static. He turned his head slightly. "They're already here," he said. The alley smelled of fuel and hot metal, the air thick with the hum of distant engines. The stranger's hood shadowed most of his face, but his voice carried the steady tone of someone used to making offers that couldn't be refused. "They're already here," he repeated, glancing toward the street beyond the alley. "If you want to walk away, follow me now." Kept his wrench raised. "And where exactly are we walking to?" Outside the city grid, no scans, no patrols." The man's eyes flicked to Lyra. "You'll be invisible until you decide your next move." Lyra frowned. "Why help us?" The stranger's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's just say I have a professional dislike for the Council's games." Heavy footsteps clanged somewhere nearby, enforcer boots on metal plating. The sound was getting closer. "Weighed the odds, stay here and fight. Impossible, run blind into the streets, suicide." He lowered the wrench slightly. "Lead the way." The man turned without another word, striding down the narrow back path between stacked fuel drums. Lyra stuck close to his side, her ball clutched tight under her arm. They wove through the underbelly of the spaceport, cargo corridors, maintenance tunnels, and half-lit storage bays. The man moved fast, never hesitating at intersections. He knew these routes. After several minutes, the noise of the enforcers faded. The air grew cooler, and the smell of exhaust gave way to damp stone. They emerged into a forgotten drainage passage, its walls slick with moisture, the only light coming from a flickering panel far ahead. "This is, though?" asked. "Almost," the man replied, "just ahead." The passage opened into a low chamber lined with scavenged furniture, metal bunks, a battered table littered with empty ration packs. A single lantern glowed in the center. The man pulled back his hood. His skin was pale gray, with faint geometric tattoos along his jawline, old, faded markings that recognized. This man wasn't just any local, he was ex-militia. "You fought for the Council once," said flatly. "Once," the man replied, "before I realized they were only protecting themselves." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You still haven't said why you care about us." The man gestured toward the bunks. "Sit, listen, then decide." Reluctantly, they sat. The man leaned against the table, folding his arms. "Name, I've been watching you since the first trial, girl. The enforcers didn't just notice you, they've been ordered to stop you." Frowned. "Why? She's just a kid playing." Shook his head. "Not just a kid. You don't understand the politics here. The Youth League isn't just about sport. The Council uses it to filter talent. Those who make it off-world are either indoctrinated into their military academies or sold into corporate contracts." Lyra's fingers tightened around the ball. "I just want to play, I just want out." "And that's exactly the problem," said. "You're not under their control, they can't own your future, so they'll destroy it." Silence stretched for a moment, then said, "You mentioned getting us off-world." Nodded. "There's a freighter leaving tonight, not Council-sanctioned, smuggler ship. I can get you on it." Studied him, and in return. His faint smile returned. "You work for me when you land, one job, after that you're free." Didn't like the sound of it. "What kind of job?" "Delivery," said casually. "Nothing you can't handle." His gut twisted. People like never meant nothing, literally. Before could push, a distant thunk echoed down the drainage passage. His head snapped toward the sound. "Too late," he muttered. The lantern flickered. Somewhere beyond the chamber, heavy boots splashed through shallow water. Moved fast. He pulled a side panel away from the wall, revealing a narrow vertical shaft. "This leads to the old lift tunnels. From there, we can reach the city edge without crossing the main streets." Hesitated, "Or it leads straight into a trap." His eyes hardened. "You can trust me, or you can wait here for the enforcers to tear the place apart." The boots were closer now, just beyond the outer passage. Lyra's gaze darted between them. "We don't have time." Cursed under his breath. "Fine, you first." Climbed into the shaft, disappearing upward. Lyra went next, her metal leg clanging against the rungs, brought up the rear. The shaft was tight and dark, the air stale. Every creak of the rungs echoed. Somewhere below, voices barked commands, mechanical, cold. They climbed for what felt like minutes, muscles burning. Finally, stopped and pushed open a hatch above. Moonlight spilled in. They emerged onto the crumbling roof of an old storage block at the edge of the city. From here, the desert stretched out in all directions, silver under the twin moons. Crouched low, scanning the horizon. We need to reach the canyon. Smuggler rendezvous is in 1 hour. His eyes swept the rooftops behind them. No movement, but that didn't ease the knot in his gut. They dropped to the sand below and moved fast, keeping low among the shadows of broken walls. The air was cooler out here, but the silence felt wrong. Too wrong. Slowed, we're being followed. Didn't look back, I know. A faint hum reached his ears, at first like distant wind, then sharper, mechanical. From the darkness behind, 3 small aerial drones drifted into view. Their sensor eyes glowed faint red. Council scouts hissed, "Run." They sprinted toward the dark cut of the canyon ahead. The drones accelerated, their engines whining. A thin beam of red light swept over the sand, targeting scans. A sharp crack split the night as one of the drones fired a stun bolt. The blast hit the sand just behind his feet, throwing up a spray of dust. Down here, veered suddenly toward a jagged gap in the ground, a collapsed section of the canyon rim. They slid down the slope, rocks clattering underfoot. The canyon floor was narrow, walled by high stone on both sides. The hum of the drones echoed overhead. Glanced up, 2 drones were still tracking them, their red beams slicing through the dust. Skidded to a halt beside a cluster of old mining carts. In. Watts began. Hide snapped. They piled into one of the carts, ducking low, pulled a tarp over the top just as the drones swept directly overhead. For a long, tense minute, nothing happened, just the faint hum fading into the distance. Lyra let out a shaky breath. Did we lose them? Didn't answer. He was staring at the far end of the canyon. Followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. Figures were emerging from the shadows, not enforcers this time. Smugglers, 6 of them, armed and armored, their insignias mismatched and dangerous-looking. The leader, a tall woman with a scar down her cheek, smiled at. "Right on time," she said, "and you brought the payment." Her eyes landed on Lyra. His hand went to his wrench. "What is this?" Didn't flinch. "The job, she's the job." The canyon air felt colder now, shadows clinging to the stone walls like a second skin. Didn't move. His hand stayed tight on the wrench, his eyes fixed on. "You set us up," said, voice low. Didn't deny it. "I told you I needed a job done. This is it." The smuggler leader's smile widened. "Don't take it personally, human. Business is business." Lyra's silver eyes darted between them. "What do you want with me?" The leader tilted her head. "Not me, my buyer, off-world syndicate with deep pockets." Stepped in front of Lyra. "You're selling a kid." The leader's expression hardened. "Not just a kid, a seer." Blinked. "A what?" Sighed. "She's not just good at, she was born with, call it, neural precognition. She sees plays before they happen, reads patterns before they form." Lyra's voice was small. "It just instincts." "No," said. "It's rare, and the council doesn't want her going off-world free. If the syndicate buys her first, they get an edge in every market, every game, every fight." His gut tightened, so this wasn't just about a prosthetic leg. This was about owning her mind. The leader raised her hand, and 2 of her crew stepped forward. "Take her." Moved without thinking. His wrench cracked against the first smuggler's forearm, sending the man's weapon clattering to the ground. Lyra darted back, clutching her ball like it was a shield. The second smuggler swung a stun rod at its head. He ducked, driving his shoulder into the man's chest and shoving him into the canyon wall. "Stop him," the leader barked. 2 more smugglers rushed in. Knew he couldn't win a drawn-out fight, not outnumbered, notwithstanding by like a vulture. "Lyra," he shouted, "run." She hesitated for half a second, then turned and bolted down the canyon, metal leg clanging against the stone floor. 1 smuggler went after her. Lunged to intercept, but stepped in his way, drawing a compact pistol. "Don't," said. Froze, fury burning through him. "After all your speeches about the council, you're just another seller of lives." His expression didn't change. "Sometimes you have to play the same dirty game to win." A sharp cry echoed from down the canyon, Lyra's voice. His blood ran cold. He didn't think. His free hand shot out, grabbing the barrel of his pistol and yanking it sideways. The shot went off with a deafening crack, slamming into the canyon wall. His wrench swung up in the same motion, smashing into his jaw. Went down hard, tore down the canyon. Ahead, the smuggler chasing Lyra had almost reached her. She stumbled, catching herself on her hands, then tried to run again. The smuggler reached for her shoulder, just as slammed into him from behind, both of them hitting the ground in a tangle of limbs. Wrenched the man's stun rod free and jabbed it into his ribs. The smuggler convulsed, gasping before going limp. Move hauled Lyra to her feet. They ran together, the sounds of shouting and boots pounding after them. The canyon narrowed ahead into a slot barely wide enough for two people. They squeezed through, scraping against the rock. Behind them, the smugglers' voices grew fainter, too wide to follow easily. The slot opened into a higher ridge overlooking the desert. Moonlight stretched over the sand in pale ribbons. Scan the horizon, no easy cover. We've got to keep moving. Lyra shook her head, breathless. They'll just keep coming. They'll stop when we make it too costly to chase us, he said. She gave him a wary look. And how do we do that? His gaze drifted back toward the canyon mouth, where the smugglers would soon appear. By turning the ground under them into a trap. They circled wide along the ridge until they came to a jagged overhang above the canyon. Loose rock littered the edge. Crouched and began prying at the largest stones with his wrench. Help me push, he said. Together they shoved at a boulder until it rocked forward, teetering on the edge. Below, torch beams and glowing visors marked the smugglers' approach. Nodded to Lyra, now. They shoved. The boulder tumbled, crashing into the canyon with an echoing roar. Shouts rang out below, followed by the clatter of smaller rocks breaking loose. Two of the smugglers dove for cover. Another was knocked off his feet entirely. The leader's furious voice cut through the chaos. Get them, I want them alive. Grabbed Lyra's hand, time to disappear. They scrambled down the far side of the ridge, the slope steep but navigable. By the time they reached the bottom, their pursuers were tangled in the chaos they'd left behind. But knew it wouldn't last, knew these canyons, he'd be coming after them. As they moved deeper into the desert, Lyra finally spoke. You didn't have to do that, you could left me. Glanced at her. I told you before, no one helped me when I needed it. I'm not making that mistake again. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if they catch us anyway? Tightened his grip on the wrench. Then I make sure they regret it. They reached a cluster of old mining huts half buried in the sand. One door hung open, revealing a dusty interior scattered with rusted tools and empty barrels. This'll do, said. We'll rest here until sunrise. Lyra sat against the wall, her prosthetic clicking softly as she adjusted it. Why do you think I'm worth so much to them? Crouched nearby. Because you've got something they can't buy, and people like that hate what they can't control. A faint hum drifted through the night air. Froze, that's not wind. They stepped outside. On the horizon, a council skimmer was cutting across the sand, its searchlights sweeping in long arcs, and riding in the back. His face was swollen from the blow, but his eyes burned with fury. They found us, Lyra whispered. His mind raced, no more running, not across open sand. He looked at the huts around them, the rusted fuel drums, the broken mining equipment. His jaw set. We're not going anywhere, he said. We're going to make our stand. The hum of the skimmer grew louder, engines snarling as it closed in. The council skimmer roared closer, its searchlights slicing across the sand like blades. Stood in the shadow of the old mining hut, eyes scanning the scattered junk around them. Fuel drums, broken winches, lengths of frayed cable. Can you really fight them? Lyra asked, her voice low. I can't outgun them, said, but I can make sure they walk into the worst game of they've ever played. He moved fast, dragging the fuel drums into a loose semicircle in front of the hut. Lyra watched as he pulled a coil of cable from a rusted hook and strung it low between two half-buried posts. He explained, if they rush in, they'll hit it before they hit us. What about the fuel? She asked. His jaw tightened. If things go bad, we make sure nobody wins. The skimmer slowed as it neared the huts, kicking up a storm of sand. The searchlights pinned them in place, and a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Mechanic girl, you have one chance to surrender. Glanced at Lyra, you trust me. Her silver eyes locked on his. Yes. Then follow my lead. The skimmer stopped 20 meters out, jumped down, flanked by 2 armored enforcers and 3 smugglers. Apparently, old enemies had decided they hated more than each other tonight. His voice was cold. You could have walked away rich, Reeves. Now you'll just be dust in the wind. Stepped forward into the light, wrench in hand. Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you. The first enforcer advanced, baton raised. Now barked. Lyra, already crouched behind a barrel, hurled her ball at the cable's midpoint. The force yanked it taut just as the enforcer charged. His armored boots caught, and he pitched forward, crashing into the sand. The second enforcer veered to the side, raising his weapon, but was already moving. He swung the wrench in a brutal arc, smashing the man's visor. The enforcer staggered, blinded. The smugglers opened fire, low-energy stun bolts cutting through the dark. Dove behind a barrel as one of the shots hit a fuel drum with a sharp clang. Shouted, "Alive, you idiots!" I said alive. Lyra rolled another ball, this one a dented, hollow practice sphere, into the open. The smugglers, thinking it was a grenade, dove for cover. Grinned, nice fake out, but didn't take the bait. He skirted the fight, moving toward Lyra. Saw it too late. Lyra, he shouted. She turned just as grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet. Enough running, he hissed. You're coming with. Her metal leg lashed out, catching him square in the knee. The reinforced joint made a sickening crack and dropped with a howl. Charged, wrench raised, but one of the smugglers stepped into his path. The man's stun rod caught across the ribs, sending a jolt of fire through his nerves. He hit the sand hard, gasping. Through the haze, he saw struggling up again, pistol in hand, aiming at Lyra. Forced himself to move. He grabbed the nearest fuel drum, rolling it toward the skimmer. One of the smugglers shouted in alarm, but it was too late. Sparked the welding torch from his belt and touched it to the leaking seam. The drum ignited in a blinding bloom of flame. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was enough. The skimmer's front end went up in a fireball, the concussion knocking flat and scattering the smugglers. Lyra ran to, helping him to his feet. We have to go. They stumbled toward the far edge of the hut cluster, the chaos behind them drowning out any pursuit. One enforcer tried to follow, but Lyra's ball slammed into his chest with pinpoint accuracy, knocking him backward into the sand. They reached the ridge and scrambled up, the desert opening wide before them under the twin moons. Below, the burning skimmer cast long shadows against the canyon walls. The remaining smugglers were dragging away from the flames, alive but beaten. Leaned on his wrench, breathing hard. That's it, they won't chase us now. Lyra glanced at him. Because you hurt them. He shook his head. Because they'll be too busy blaming each other. They walked until dawn painted the desert in pale gold. On the horizon, the towers of Tarsus IV's city faded into the heat haze. What now? Lyra asked. Thought about it. The trials are done, the scouts are gone, you can't take that path anymore. Her shoulders sagged, so we lost. He looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. Not necessarily. From his jacket, he pulled a small data chip. Before the trials, I fixed a scout's nav unit, the star charts to this. Her brow furrowed. Why? In case I needed to find them later, he said. One of those ships is bound for the Rim colonies. I know where they'll refuel. Her eyes widened. You mean? Yeah, he said. We're getting you off-world, my way this time. She smiled, small but real, and after that, looked out across the endless sand. After that, we keep moving, because out there's always another council, another game they think they've already won. And we play, she asked. He smirked. We don't just play, we change the rules. As the first heat shimmered on the horizon, they set off toward the distant hills. Behind them, the wreckage of the night's fight cooled in the sand, silent now, but a reminder to anyone who might come looking. The desert wind carried their footprints away within minutes, as if they'd never been there at all. But for the Council of Tarsus IV, and for the smugglers, the memory would remain. The human mechanic who wouldn't back down, and the disabled alien girl who learned to run anyway. Weeks later, on a fuel station orbiting a Rim colony moon, a scout captain finds herself approached by a human and a young alien girl with silver eyes. They ask about work. She asks about experience. And when the girl smiles, the captain swears for a moment she can see the next move before it happens.